Hello there. Letters of recommendation are an integral component to any grad school application package. However, there's a good bit of ambiguity in how you go about getting letters of recommendation, and it's a bit of an awkward process. So let's take a look through it. So typically, when you're applying to graduate school, you're going to be asked for 3 letter writers. Sometimes they'll ask for 4, and I've heard of people asking for only 2, but it seems like most people, and certainly everybody I applied to, asked for 3, with only one saying, if you want to add a 4th one, you are welcome to. Now, as a general rule, your letter writers should be people who have the same degree or a higher level degree than the program you're applying to. So if you're applying to a master's degree, your letter writer should have a master's or a doctorate. If you're applying to a doctoral program, your letter writers should have doctorates. Not a hard and fast rule, but it's a good guideline to have. If you're applying to a graduate program in psychology, your letter writers should be in psychology or closely related fields. Although, again, it's not the end of the world if they are from different fields, even if they're not even tangentially related to each other. What really matters, and what I think is the most important component, is the ability of that person, your letter writer, to speak to your capabilities. So your ability to write, to speak, to lead others, to conduct research, to present at conferences, all of these things, your drive, your motivation, your work ethic. That's the most important part in my opinion. And so as you go through with your letter writers, I think the best way to do it is to write down the people you are willing to ask for a letter. And for me, that was a fairly large number. I had about 15 different names of people who I would have considered to ask for letters. Once I had that list, then I started ranking them based on the programs I was applying to, the degrees I was looking at, and the relationship I had with that person. And I ended up with the people who knew me the best being at the top of my list. And that ended up giving me in a spot where one of my letter writers did not have a degree in the field I was applying to. But having talked with the different programs, they thought it was better to have someone who knew me well than to have, but didn't have the same degree I was applying to, than to have someone who knew me less but had the same degree. So if you are interested in figuring that out, you can reach out to the programs you're applying to, and they should give you some sort of answer. Now, once you have your programs ranked, you get to take that list and you get to start asking. So starting at the top of your list and going down. Asking is a little bit of an awkward process, but it's not as bad as you would imagine. There's sort of a component of respect to it as well, in that by asking them, you're saying, of all the people I've taken classes with and all the people I know, you are the person who I would like to write a letter for me. So there is something sort of honoring in that. Although there is also the aspect of writing letters is a lot of work, especially if you're applying to a large number of universities, as each university will have different prompts for them to write. And so it's very important that you give your letter writers a heads up on how many programs and the due dates well in advance. So how would I go about asking? Well, I think the most important thing is that you set up a meeting face-to-face and that it's scheduled. So don't drop by if you can avoid it. Make sure it's face-to-face if you can. In my personal preference, if I can't go face-to-face, then I would try a phone call. And if that doesn't work, then I would go to some sort of email or LinkedIn, Facebook Messenger, whatever else comes after that. But always try for in-person. Then when you're going through this, make sure that you're scheduled. You don't just want to stop by, because this can be a bit of a longer discussion of, this is why I think you are the best person to write letters for me. This is the set of schools I'm going to be applying to. These are the rough due dates. Are you willing to write those letters for me? And I think that it's important to be prepared to answer why you're asking them instead of someone else. And you could just have that as a backup if they ask, but I think it's important to say that up front of, I'm looking at applying to graduate schools. I've thought about who I'd ask to write letters, and your name always came up. I can't think of anybody who I would rather have write letters for me than you. Are you comfortable writing a positive letter of recommendation for me? And I think that important part there is the, are you comfortable writing a positive letter of recommendation for me? Because depending on how long you've known the person and the relationship you have, they may not be comfortable writing a positive letter of recommendation for you. And so it's better to have that out for them so that you can know if they're willing to write that positive letter. If there's hesitation in their answer, or if they say no, because you have given them an out, so they're more likely to say no, be willing to go on to your next person, because it's better to have an enthusiastic letter from someone who has known you less and has fewer credentials than a lukewarm letter from someone who knows you very well and is well credentialed. It's not putting your best foot forward to have someone who's not willing to write a letter for you write a letter for you. So if they're willing to, then it's time to get into the discussion of, I'm looking at these 5 programs. The deadlines are all beginning of December. Those general time commitments, those are important. I'd also make sure that you ask if they need anything. Some of my letter writers said, just send the letter requests to me and I'll write them. Others said, I want links to the program website so I can see what type of language they use, so I can tailor my language in your letter writing so that it matches up with what their goals as a program are, or give me your CV, your transcript, and a list of things that you would like me to mention. And so there's a big diversity there in what you will be giving them. I'd also say that you should give them a couple of weeks head time before your letters are due for when you ask them. So I worked at between 6 and 8 weeks of lag time between when I asked and when the letters were due. And this is just because it's a lot of work to write a letter. It can be a challenging thing to write, and you definitely want to give them the time to do it well, because it is an important component of a graduate school application package. And then once you've asked and they've agreed, or you've asked and they've disagreed and you've gone to the next person and they have agreed, and you have your 3, you are going to go back to your grad school application portals, input their names, and then a couple days later, check back with each of those letter writers to make sure that they have received the email link to the letter. And then as you get closer to the deadline, maybe 2 weeks out, go ahead, check your portal to see if those letters have been submitted. And if they have, awesome, you're golden. If they aren't, go ahead and reach out to that professor just to ask them where they are in that process. The deadline is coming up. Some professors do need those reminders. Some will submit them right away, but some will wait right until the deadline. And it's up to you to make sure that you're on top of the deadlines and that you can check with them to make sure. And then if I would check a couple of days before just to make sure that everything has come in, and typically they'll send you confirmation emails when the letter arrives at the university. But you'll want to go ahead and do that so that you're covered, that your application is not incomplete because your letter writer forgot and you didn't check to make sure that they had submitted it. Now, if you're going to have any physical letters, because some universities still do physical letters, I think mostly at the master's level now and at smaller universities. I know SFA had my letter writers use physical mail to get letters to them. I was in a different state than most of my letter writers at that point. And so what I did was I set up an envelope that was pre-stamped and pre-addressed from my letter writer to the person at the school who needed it. And then I printed out the form that they were asked to complete. and I put it all in an envelope, and I sent it out to each letter writer so that they didn't have to do any extra work besides write the letter, that they didn't have to go pay for postage, they didn't have to find an envelope, they didn't have to print out the letter form. It was all there and ready for them to write. And that's just sort of a professional courtesy of, you're going through all this effort to do something to help me in my career. I'll make sure that you don't have to do any unnecessary work, that everything is set up for you. Another thing I included was a pre-addressed postcard in the package so that my letter writer could just slip it into their envelope, and once the university received my letter, they could just take that postcard, drop it in the mailbox as a confirmation letter that would get sent to me saying, we have received this letter from this person, you're good to go. And it worked out perfectly for me. I ended up getting all of my postcards back, and it was nice to have that confirmation, because they would not have given me confirmation about them otherwise without me going down and talking to someone or perhaps calling the right person. So there you have it. The overview of letters of recommendation. Be careful in who you ask. Try to give them an out so that if they are not comfortable writing a letter for you, they don't end up writing a lukewarm letter for you that sinks your chances of getting into your program of choice. Make sure that you give your letter writers plenty of time to write the letters, and that you check up on them to make sure that the letters are in and that there are no technical issues or forgetting and scheduling issues that prevent them from writing those letters for you. And then once you've done all of that, your application's done, and you get to wait until you hear back from your grad school. I hope this is helpful for you in securing letters of recommendation and in the process of getting those letters to your schools. Until next time, cheers.